Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 293. Today's subject, a genre breakdown. We'll be talking about urban fantasy.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Back on the farm again. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And all kinds of urban and fantastic. I am Michael Miller.
I could never be hip enough to be urban fantasy. I'm too rural.
I think you're urban fantastic. I think that you should start introducing people to yourself. Introducing yourself.
I'm Jeffrey
Ingram, and I'm urban fantastic.
I am urban fantastic.
I'm gonna start using that. It's pretty funny.
You gotta own it. Yeah. So, I do have like one of the worlds I've been working on is actually technically urban fantasy.
Really?
Yeah, it's my dragon world.
Like it focuses mostly on the dragon race, or there's just a lot of dragons in it.
Who is a dragon. And there's another character right now that is a dragon. Dragons are very rare, exceptionally powerful. But obviously the one that you're focused on doesn't really even know that he's a dragon and doesn't have his powers and is at great risk because nothing else would want him to figure out what his powers are. So
I had a story seed that I jotted down a little while ago that it was about a dragon. It was the basic gist was, if I'm remembering it correctly, is that dragons were the source of all magic in the world, but they're dying out.
Mm-hmm.
But they're kind of jerks. So it's like the more mythical of the mythical races are in dire need of saving the dragons and preserving their line so that they can preserve magic in the world because they take advantage of it. But the dragons are jerks.
Yeah.
So it's just something you made me think of.
Dragons are jerks. Sounds like another urban fantasy dragon seed to me there.
Right.
Different. He's not Neil Gaiman me.
Who, me or you?
Either way.
He. Who's he when you said he?
I can't say his name.
You just did say his name. I'm assuming that's the he you were referring to, but you said he's not Neil Gaiman, which is what made me think you were referring to a different he as opposed to the name you actually used in the sentence.
He was you. You are not Neil Gaiman me by talking about dragons.
Oh, I see. I just missed part of the sentence. That makes much more sense. Yes. One of these days I will, though, but I won't publish. So I'll just be like, I'll rub it in your face. I'll just be like, I had the idea first.
That's right. Today we're going to talk about urban fantasy. This is another one. This is one of the things I like about fantasy is like, I think really hard to kind of think of the subgenres because fantasy is really just this idea that things are fantastical.
Well, I mean,
there's certainly lots of things can fall into it.
Sure. And there's the generic colloquial, like what we all kind of agree upon when we hear the word fantasy, we all pretty much jump to Tolkien.
Yeah.
And by we all, I mean me. When you say fantasy, that's what I think of. Yeah. But I'm not limited in that that's just the first thing that comes to mind.
But if someone came to you and they said something that wasn't Tolkien-like fantasy, and they're like, oh, look at this piece of fantasy, you'd probably be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantasy. Yeah, absolutely. Because you could go to like Labyrinth, which is not even remotely...
Or Pan's Labyrinth.
Or Pan's Labyrinth, obviously not even remotely Tolkien, but very fantasy.
Very fantasy, yep.
So... When you get into urban fantasy, like how do you define the urban part of it?
Well, there are three things I think,
and these are what you think.
These are what I think.
Okay,
and that
I'm gonna shoot all three down.
Definitive.
I'm gonna shoot all three down.
First, it's always earth-based.
No, why would you do that?
Because it's part of urban fantasy. That's
you can have an Earth. Okay, so does that mean if you were to have a world that was very much like Earth but definitively not Earth, you wouldn't qualify it?
I wouldn't qualify it as urban fantasy.
Why not?
It's not the rhythm of the books that have been put out there.
Okay, so have you ever seen The Wings of Hamines?
No.
Okay. It's
But
not
it's
a
not urban
fantasy. It's not a science fiction, but it's not Earth as we know it. It's a completely different.
That's fine.
But you could totally be like, oh, this is
fantasy.
Earth based, but it's not Earth.
Yeah. Sure. So what?
Actually, it might be Earth now that I think about it. It's been a long time since I've watched.
Maybe it's an alt Earth.
So, but the point is, if they don't say it's Earth, you don't qualify.
You don't necessarily have to say it's Earth, but it has to be Earth. You know, it could be sort of like a Shannara Chronicles in the future kind of thing.
But that's still Earth, isn't it?
It's Shannara's Chronicles is Earth in the future, but it appears to be a fantasy world in the past.
Well, right. But that still definitively is Earth. What I'm saying is if you have a planet that is definitively not Earth, but very Earth-like, you would not...
I would not call it urban fantasy because pretty much all the urban fantasy I know is all Earth-based. It's one of the few consistent things.
So what would you call it if it was pretty much... It's the exact same story, but they definitively say it's this other planet.
Well, we'll get into this.
Like that's the only detail that they.
We'll get into some of the other things later because there are lots of things that are very similar to it.
Okay, what's number 2?
Modern 2. It's not 100%, but this is like very close, approaching 100%. It's typically contemporary, modern day.
Okay.
Sometimes they do go into the future. I don't think I've seen any in the past. I would call urban fantasy. I could be wrong there.
I'm going to have to think about that one. So like Shadowrun, you would call an urban fantasy.
Shadowrun, you could argue.
Even though it's pretty far in the future.
It's definitely a cyberpunk. You could argue it's an urban fantasy.
I mean, I would.
Same thing with Shadowrun, which is what you just said. Yeah.
I think you were going to go with
2000.
Say again?
I would call Twilight 2000 as well.
I don't know if I know what that is.
It's like a post-apocalyptic Earth. Like World War II happened or World War III happened in like the 80s or 90s or something like that. And
did you ever,
or like 1999?
Did you ever see the movie Reign of Fire?
Reign of Fire? No. I think we've talked about before.
Christian Bale, Matthew McConaughey, Dragon.
I want to see it because of the one scene we've talked about before in there, but yeah.
You never watched it though.
I've just never seen it. I've never even heard of it. With those two guys is kind of like,
right?
How did I not freaking hear of this?
This might have to be because it's not a good movie.
It's worth seeing, but not good. Yeah.
It's got a couple really good scenes. It's got 2 or 3 like really good scenes in it that are
something about the editing and the writing was
just in general the most of the movies. I mean, definitely the ending's not great.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth watching, if only for some of the sequences and for some of the performances. Mm-hmm. But the overall movie is like, I wonder if they didn't run out of money and they just had to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So,
or the studio and the director clashed in ideas, and it wasn't someone big enough to be able to come out with a director's cut. Like,
I'll tell you what. Here's what we're gonna do. This is gonna be our next big media episode. I'm gonna get it for you, and we'll watch it, and then we'll do like a what was it? An Excalibur style episode on Reign of Fire.
That was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun. Okay, so what's number 3?
Number 3, this one most people might argue with me about. Most people might go like they're not sure if I'm right here. It's needs to be an urban setting.
I mean, yeah.
And not like a Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Not like a small city. It has to be a large city. Not necessarily gigantic.
Okay.
Not necessarily like a New York City, mm-hmm. but I would say at least a Chicago size, mm-hmm. maybe like a Detroit in its heyday kind of size. I'd say at least 1 million plus. I mean, it has to have all of the urban stuff. It needs mass transit. It needs all of it. Now, there are a lot of different spices that can also go along with urban. There's lots of different feels and touches. Some of the big ones that I've seen a lot is paranormal type of things worked in there.
And is that like the focus? You mean like what do you give me?
Like the Magicians, where you might have wizards.
I've never watched that.
It's like some people like it. Some people think it's really good. I think it's really bad.
I think you've mentioned this one before.
Yeah, it's like one of those. It's like trying to be like a George R.R. Martin for Harry Potter.
That doesn't sound bad.
It doesn't sound bad, but I think it's maybe the lead character just really rubs me the wrong way. I don't like it. I don't like it.
Fair enough.
But vampires, zombies were popular for a little while, like talking, thinking zombies.
There was
not like mindless zombies.
I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna look up. I got no. I got a good urban.
But supernatural type of stuff. A lot of times it's like sort of like there's a secret world inside of the world. Is where a lot of it comes from. I would say most YA fantasy that I've heard of that has become popular, probably since I got out of the service, has been urban fantasy. So probably since the 90s at some point, urban fantasy took over young adult, and sort of most things that have come out through there are probably, and I'd even argue some of the post-apocalyptical stuff like Hunger Games, where like, especially in the first book, it's focused in the city and it's all about the capital city. So you have that as a centerpiece. You don't have to always be in the urban setting, but the urban setting has to be exceptionally important. And you can maybe argue that it went away from that later on, but maybe only one book, because the third book they're back in the city again. So whatever.
I mean, they spend a lot of time not in this. It's probably 50-50. I think it feels like more of the story is in the wilderness and in the games. But you're right. They spend a truckload of time in the urban setting.
And it's essential to the plot. And so that one is sort of borderline. It's definitely post-apocalyptic, which once again could be another spice thrown in there. So, I mean, that's kind of the problem with this as a genre, is really, it's probably 500 genres, but they have those basic things where they're earth-based. They're typically modern day, or if they're in the future, it doesn't seem like really far future. And even like Shadowrun, where it's technically really far in the future, like the feel of it
doesn't feel,
is near future.
The only thing that feels
like cyberpunk with magic.
The only thing that feels far future about it is the technology. Only
some of the technology.
Well, I would say a lot of it. I mean, the computer technology, medical technology, weaponry, it's all technology across the board in there. The only thing that's not super advanced is transportation.
Do they not have like Alexas? No, they don't. So they're behind in some areas too.
What do you mean? What
Alexa, like the AIs.
They have AIs, yes. They also have. Fine. The show that I was thinking of is called Lost Girl, and there's 5 seasons. It's on Netflix, and I think
the succubus one.
Yes,
I've seen like the first couple episodes of that.
Me too. I remember watching, and I just looked on my Netflix.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer is like a prime example of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched 3 episodes of it. Not even. It looks like I watched 2.5 episodes, and I remember really liking the start, and definitely urban fantasy. And there's 5 seasons of it, so I think I might get back to it and give it a shake.
Yeah, I've seen I checked out a couple episodes one day when I was sick, and I've never gotten back to it. Currently, what am I watching currently?
Loved Buffy, loved Charmed,
Killjoys. That's pretty interesting.
I think I know that one. Which one is that one?
It's sort of a low budget but well done Canadian one that gets played on Sci-Fi. It's actually from the makers of Orphan Black.
What occurs in it?
Essentially, there's this woman, Dutch, and she is a killjoy, essentially a bounty hunter.
Okay.
And she has a ship and she's a partner who's a killjoy. And
spaceship.
Okay,
so far future.
Spaceship, far future. Maybe not even in the same universe as Earth. Earth doesn't get mentioned, but it's like deep space. Parasite aliens are taking over the universe essentially, and they're battling it.
Okay.
It's, I believe, still on television right now. I'm not positive. I watched it on Hulu.
I've heard the name before.
Yeah, it's good. It's low budget. Like sometimes the effects you're like, yeah.
Well, sci-fi.
one of the old Jimmy Olsen's. I think the one from, was it Smallville? I think he might be one of the main characters. The acting's phenomenal. The writing's really good. The special effects sometimes.
Well, that's fine. I can live with that.
And it works. It does.
Good story. Good sci-fi. Good acting.
It's from the Orphan Black. It's from the Orphan Black people. So I
haven't seen all of that either.
Yeah, that's really.
I so want to.
Yeah. Another must watch for people, and you could actually say that's probably urban fantasy too.
What about Fringe? Would you call Fringe urban
I've never
fantasy?
seen Fringe, but
Okay.
probably.
I think it more falls into like a Twilight Zone, X-Files sort of thing, which you could say
right there are on that cusp.
Yeah, you're right. You're on the cusp, but I don't think it's fair to call something like that fantasy, even though there's definitely fantasy elements in certain episodes.
But a lot of times mystery is a basis for urban fantasy. And that's the problem, is like there are a few different feels that kind of shoot through them. So it's a really hard one to kind of nail down. It's those first three things that I think are the consistents, the things that sort of hold it together.
What would you say is like a go-to character model for urban fantasy storytelling? Fish out of water, common man. Like what would be most? What is most of it?
Your common hero is going to be someone who's out of their place. Harry Potter. Essentially has no idea, gets sucked into a world he has no idea even existed. And a lot of times that is the thing. Buffy has no idea that they're vampires. She's a freaking cheerleader. Then all of a sudden she gets pulled into this world where she's a slayer.
Such a good show.
But I think that is a very common thing. It's either from the outside or someone who's an insider of the world who's been there for a long time. Dresden Files, I would say, is good urban fantasy.
I've heard of that one. I don't think I've ever watched it, though.
I've watched that one. Why are you showing me a bottle cap opener? Wow. It's an old military style can opener.
I told you.
In the Army,
I told you I was going to try to throw you off your game.
Yeah. There you go. Yes. So
what you guys can't see is like when Jeff and I record, like we're watching each other on a video feed. So it really brings something to the conversation for us, and it helps us stay in the moment. But we screw with each other sometimes. So it might be a completely benign part of the conversation for you guys, but we're doing shit to each other. Mm-hmm. So I was just slowly putting things into the video feed from the side of the frame or the bottom of the frame. He's like, "What the hell are you showing me?" Sorry, didn't mean to derail the show. I just wanted to distract you.
That's fine. I know exactly where I was though, so I'll just pick right back.
Keep going.
It's the idea. A lot of times too. I think a lot of times it's like whatever the core fantasy elements are a lot of times blocked off from the normal people. It's this idea that you're cut off.
It's like a secret world, like Vampire the Masquerade or something.
Mm-hmm. Or Twilight,
Twilight.
My skin is glittery.
The twinkly vampires who can live in the sunlight. Blah.
But they glitter.
Give me Blade. Give me Blade.
The killer, baby.
If you got a Daywalker, I want it to be special.
It's so bad. It's like that one line will always stick with me about like how my skin, it like glittered, and that's like, the skin of a killer is like what he said. And so I
don't even remember that. I don't even remember that line.
That was a line someone put up on Facebook because they were showing how bad the book was, and I never read the books or saw the movies. So
I saw a couple.
That line stuck with me.
I saw most of the movies, but I don't think I saw the dramatic conclusion.
I don't know if that line was made the movies or not. I'm not sure, but it was in the books.
I mean, some of what they did was fun and inventive. Like the concept that, okay, well, if we're in sunlight, we glitter, which gives us away as a very special being. So we live in the rainiest area of the country so that we're never in the sunlight. That's clever. But the fact that they're vampires, it's annoying. Like just make them something different.
I got my son one of those books where you there's like pages that you read, like, this is not my pirate. His scarf is really rough, and like then he can feel the scarf and its texture. And there's like textures on every page, right? And there's this pirate book I got for him, and one of them is he has a glittery sword, which really annoys me because one, there's no texture. It's like flat. It's just glittery. There's no texture to it, so it annoys me. But then I think of that book every time I see that page, and I usually incorrectly read the page. I try not to be too rude though. But I do think though, a lot of times it's like hidden, and I think that's a thing where it's a smart play and this goes to a lot of it being young adult. I think a lot of times young adults feel cut off, like the rest of the world can't understand their position, or where they're at. And there's some truth to that, because there's new challenges that come up for every generation that the old people just won't be able to get. But it's a little arrogance too, I think, on the parts of everyone that no one knows how I feel. And they might not know exactly because the exact circumstances, but they probably have felt the way you felt too.
It's
everyone has that Peter Parker moment where you just don't feel up to snuff.
What's funny is just aging in general, and like being in a scenario where, okay, so if you're a younger listener and you're listening to this, the weird thing is that you're going through experiences right now where you're on one side of it and your boss, your teacher, your parent is on the other side of it. And there are aspects of all of the things that you are experiencing right now that you do not understand, and you won't for like 20 to 30 years. So now I'm coming up on the back side of a lot of experiences that I had when I was a kid, and it cracks me up to think about the perspectives I had and the perspectives that I see in younger people that I deal with now. Because it's just like, of course you heard it when you were a kid. Oh, I was just like you. I hated that. When I was when I was a teenager, I had a family member who always said that to me. I was just like you when I was your age, and I hated that. I was like, you don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like, he
my favorite
probably
story
knew.
And I don't think I've on the show. When I went through my high school graduation, one of the local news anchors gave the keynote speech. And he got up there and he basically started into the speech, stop. Don't age. Stay exactly the way you are for the rest of your life. And the point where he was going towards is, you have that belief that you are right and you know exactly what you're doing about that time when you're 18, when you're graduating from high school, and everyone older is an idiot, everyone younger is an idiot. You're the only one, maybe a couple of your friends are the only people who are smart enough to get it. And so he kind of approached it from like, oh, don't change, because you're right. You are the smartest you'll ever be right now. I'm trying to bring up the point that you're going to learn that you're not that smart. And it's funny because I got pissed off. Like, this guy's an idiot.
Right.
And then about 10 years later, you're like,
yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good. Okay. Yeah, that was good.
Like, can I share a little?
Yeah.
So I had an experience recently where this was going back, I don't know, like I might have mentioned it on the show before, where we had an apprentice working for us, and he quit after having worked for the company for, like a year and a half. And he's, I mean, I won't get into all the particulars of it, but it was in my opinion, a really poor decision on his part. But his perspective was, I'm making more money at this other job, and I know that I don't want to do this for life. So he stopped doing it. And other people who have come in for a temporary, amount of time, and I get really bent out of shape about it, because I'm like, you don't understand. If you come into a job like this, we're looking for a commitment because we're trying to build a business. Like, we're trying to build something. And every day that you spend there, if you know you're not going to stay, is a hindrance to our progress, because once you leave, we have to start the process all over again of finding another person who's going to be there to stay. That means all that time is lost on the time that you spent working for us. That hinders our growth. That hinders our team building. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think about when I was 19 and I worked for an electrician, and it wasn't that I wanted to be an electrician. I was just doing it because I needed a job. And I worked for him for 9 months, knowing that I was going to leave. And then when he was like, okay, you got to go to school. And I was like, yeah, I'm moving back to New York. And he was like, okay, then we'll call this your 2 weeks. Yeah. And I was like, okay. I was hoping to work like another 2 months, but I was like, what am I going to say? But now that I'm, 43 and I'm on the other side of it, I think about that and I'm just like, oh, I was not, honoring him and his business by selfishly working for him for 9 months, knowing that I was leaving because he was trying to build something and I was preventing that by being there.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's a lot of coming from the other end, being a business owner, it's like there's usury both ends, and that's the reason why it's always best to go for a mutual win-win agreements with people long term.
Yeah. I worked for him again. Like when I came back from New York, the opportunity opened up again, and I worked for him for nine years. So he got it out of me. It was just that initial start that was kind of, a
little break in between.
Yeah, it took a 4-year break in between making movies in New York.
Okay. So back to urban fantasy.
Urban fantasy.
This could actually have been an urban fantasy story.
Sure.
Michael making movies in New York using magical powers to try and pull out scenes before the cops came to arrest them for not having proper licenses.
We did some guerrilla shooting. Not a lot, but I definitely was on a couple where we were like, okay, we're going to knock this out. And like the van is right over there.
If we need to, that's where
yeah. Seriously, like pick up the camera, you grab the tripod. If this goes south, we're all running to the
van. Yeah. So pros and cons
of urban fantasy in general,
just in general. What are your what are the things that you like and don't like about urban fantasy?
Okay, what I like about urban fantasy is I get the comfortability and familiarity of a modern setting. So it's something that I'm accustomed to because it's where I live and how I exist now. But I also get the extraordinary, which I don't get in my everyday life, i.e., whether it be trolls and dragons or fairies and magic or whatever it is, alternate parallel dimensions, things that right now don't hit me on the day-to-day, but you get that wish fulfillment of, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was this invisible existence that was observing us all the time. Like, did you ever read Dark Dominion?
No.
Okay. So the basic gist on Dark Dominion is there's this one guy, not unlike Daredevil, but like actually legitimately, he can't fear. And he also is able to see and step into a parallel existence that is right alongside normal life. And what it is that all the emotions and the things that you actually feel are creatures in this parallel dimension affecting you. So if you have anxiety, it's because there's this anxiety, parasitic creature attached to you. And he can see this on people and step into that world and bat them away or squash them and fight them and whatever. And he can step into it. When he steps into it, he's invisible in the real world. And he is like the only mortal that can see these things and fight it and step into this parallel dimension, the Dark Dominion. It is so clever, and it's such a neat thing because it's like, one, the wish fulfillment is that it gives you a sense of empowerment, especially as a teenager, that you might not feel. You get like, oh, there are things out there and they are supernatural.
Comfort to it, yeah.
There's a comfort to it. There's a reason for how I feel. It's this thing that I can't control.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing that appeals adolescents to Spider-Man.
I don't know if it's the same thing.
Not exactly. But
let me hear your hypothesis.
Scraggly, geeky person, because of something that hasn't happened to me yet, happened to him, transformed him, who could have been me, into a superhero. So it was something that just hasn't happened to me.
But I don't know that that's particular. I don't think that's the big draw for Spider-Man, because you're talking about like the chosen one thing. And I'll agree with you
that it's not just that he's chosen, but it's like the whole idea that he's a superhero, all of his powers. The difference between you, a pimply faced kid, who gets made fun of by the big jocks in school, and Peter Parker is that radioactive spider bit him. And if you could find that proverbial radioactive spider, like say, found $1 billion company,
right?
Then, the world's flipped on its head.
See, for me, I think Spider-Man is so attractive to the reader and the viewer is that he is fallible and he is approachable. Unlike you're like, oh, I am Superman. I am the most powerful being on the planet because I'm not even from this planet. I had a humble upbringing, very much like yours. So you can
So I'm even more.
So
humble.
you can. I'm the humblest.
Jeff.
So Jeff is really humble. So you can empathize with him because you had a similar upbringing, but you can't possibly truly understand what it's like to be so omniscient. Mm-hmm. So, and the thing that I love so much about Spider-Man and why I think he's so approachable is because he is fallible. He gets his butt kicked all the time. He loses all the time.
It's because he's like us.
That's my point. Right. But
it's the exact same point I'm making. It's just from a different angle.
I think it's not the same point.
You're wrong.
I don't think it's the same point.
You can be wrong all the time.
Fair enough. Well, I didn't complete your question because you also said, what don't I like about
what are the cons? What are the drawbacks?
Well, I would say the drawback is if you're going to do a fantasy, you get totally pulled into another world. So if you are talking like Tolkien fantasy, it's not even familiar to, except for like if you're thinking about low tech level, sure, but like we don't do, horse and buggy these days and windmills and all that jazz. People couldn't, people do, but the average person doesn't. We're driving cars and going down to the supermarket. And when you try to meld those, I feel that it's kind of too convenient. Whereas if you're just gonna throw your hat over the fence, so to speak, and fully commit to a full-fledged fantasy world, I feel like you're going for something bigger. I feel like if you're gonna go with urban fantasy, it seems like, well, I want some of that fantasy, but there's some things that I can't quite deal with. So if I put it in a modern urban setting, then I get all of the conveniences of the modern urban world, and I can work with that, but I can still pull in the fantasy and fantastical and use it as a convenience.
I can make a reason why that alley is dark and scary.
Right.
And not just the 30 guys holding weapons.
God, there's something, I was on a tangent there, and there was one thought that like came in. Like, keep going. I'll if I remember it, I'll bring it up.
We'll say it sort of was mugged from you. Probably
it was probably by those 30 guys in the alley.
Yeah. For me, I'd say
who even goes down Crime Alley?
Michael?
Why would you? Let's go down Crime Alley. That's where we'll walk home with our child.
For me,
Thomas and Martha Wayne.
The pro is you can get. I think you can reach out to more people. More people can buy into your work because people who maybe don't have the imagination to get into an elven long-eared fantasy novel could step in here because it's a thriller and there are things that they can't explain that happen, and they're called magic in the book, and there are things like that in life that you can't explain that happen too. Mm-hmm. Like, why is that guy Bill always get the promotion at work? He's a jerk and he's not very smart, but somehow he gets promoted and I don't.
It's because he gives the boss cocaine.
So it plays very much into our mindset of why in our lives. And that's the reason why it doesn't have to be modern, but it has to feel close. It has to feel close to modern, because people have to really be able to identify with the actual things that are happening. And if you go to a horse and buggy, people can't identify with it. And
well, the Amish could, but I don't think they're reading these books.
It's like stealing. It's like stealing their crap.
I got you, didn't I?
I was trying to think of the freaking roll, the sweet roll.
Sweet rolls.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like stealing the sweet roll.
Sweet roll, yes. So that's, to me, the pro. The con is you get trapped into very similar rhythms in a lot of these things. There's a lead character, there's a love triangle with the lead character. There are very common things that keep circulating up.
There's a corporation or a government agency or a big, much more powerful entity against the lead character. If you ever
get to them, there's an even larger, bigger entity behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's the government. Now it's the corporation.
Yes.
Or now it is Satan's minions.
Yeah, it's the dragon that runs the West Coast. You didn't know that. It's one dragon.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you thought I was the bad guy?
All those corporations, we're all the same. You think we're all competing against each other? We're just trying to stay afloat because there's one guy.
That's right.
And he's not really a guy. he's an it.
So, you know, it works. I think it makes for good television and good books too. Harry Potter's good. I like it a lot.
Would you call? Yeah, I guess I would call Harry Potter. Harry Potter is so fantastical. I just immediately think fantasy.
But remember, it's pocket
urban.
Right?
Yeah. Urban fantasy qualifies.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. But you're between the was that 13 and a half?
Yeah, something like that.
The train station.
33 and a half?
33 and a half.
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
I'm not a Potter
Potterhead. Potterphile. Is that what they're called?
That's what
Potterfile. I kind of like that.
It works, doesn't it?
I've seen all the movies. I think I recently said on the show that I'm currently reading the first book for the first time.
Yeah, read the books. The books are definitely.
I am reading the books.
Yeah.
I read it to my wife aloud. Yeah, when we go to bed.
Cool evening activity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll make that the real world.
But she's about to start her second semester, so it's going to be note cards and physiology soon.
That's my favorite one too. Now, moving on. But yeah, so my con is it's like, and I don't know, this is maybe a plight of everything, but to me, it's like it's a lot of the same rhythms and beats get hit in every one of these I see, and so I don't know if that's just because I think it's because it's too prevalent right now.
Do you think that makes them predictable or just repetitive?
Yes.
Both. Both. Okay.
And sometimes it does it well, and I can still appreciate it. But I think it's so common at this point to me, and maybe that's kind of where I'm getting to.
Do you have any favorite books in this? You can't say Harry Potter.
Why? I would say those are probably my favorite ones.
Like legitimately, yeah.
Yeah, the Dresden Files. I've only seen the movie or the television show for, and it was really good.
Oh, is there books for that?
I believe there are books, maybe comic books. I'm not sure.
I did not know that. I thought that was just a show.
Hunger Games was okay.
I liked the books.
Yeah,
I did read
the movies were like, the books were
books are better. Books are better.
Yeah. I'd say a lot of those, and there's a whole series just like that too of similar shows. And
which no, that one's not really.
But I think they all they get reused a lot when they're successful.
Did you ever see Jupiter Ascending? Is that just strictly science fiction, or is that fantasy as well?
I'm not sure if I've seen that one.
I have it on my queue. I haven't watched it yet, though.
I don't think I've seen that one.
But there's a series of books. I want to say there's like 3 books for that, and the movie did so terribly they never made the sequel.
Yeah, is that one of the
Mila Kunis and Channing Tatum?
I don't know.
Like I said, I haven't watched it either.
I think I saw a preview for it, and I thought it might be interesting, but I've never seen it.
So I think everybody said that, which is why they didn't make the sequel.
They didn't want to make the sequel.
Now, what about something that is like recent history, like a what's it? Like a Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or a Golden Compass?
Mm-hmm. Those are not urban fantasy.
You wouldn't call that urban fantasy?
No.
Even though it's only like within the last 50 to 60 years.
Lion, the Witch. Well, yeah, but remember, you stepped through the wardrobe, and you're not on Earth anymore. You're in Narnia.
True.
Golden Compass.
But if you read the books, though,
I don't. I'm not familiar enough with that one. So.
There are aspects of, I'll admit, very little, but there are aspects where they bring it to the real world, and some of the, like, for instance, you know how in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there's that like gas lamp out in the forest.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know why?
I don't remember. It's been so long.
The White Queen, I think, is what they call her. The Snow Queen, the evil character in that one.
Snow Queen,
yeah. In the past, the basic gist is I think this is the first, because I read the first book, and the basic gist is this. Aslan has, very much like Christian mythology, has a tree that gives apples, and those apples will grant healing / eternal life. And he tells the child to go get me an apple, but don't eat it. And he brings the apple, and he wants to take it to his mother, who is dying, and his mother, who is on Earth, not Narnia. And Aslan grants him this. He gives his mother the apple, and she
Mm-hmm.
recovers. And this is what's totally awesome. This is why I love that series, even though I have not read all of them. He plants the seeds and the tree grows. And he eventually, when the tree is getting ready to die, he cuts the tree down and he makes the wardrobe. So the wardrobe is made, it's made from a tree that grew from an apple from Narnia, which is why stepping into it allows you access to Narnia. And that little boy is the old man,
of course,
in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So when the children are like, we stepped through and we went to Narnia, he's like, tell me more. Even though the woman of the house is like, oh, they're just children and they're making up fantastical things. And he's immediately interested because he, as a child, had been to Narnia.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
hang on. We're actually
is off Earth.
We're actually getting to. I'm circling back around because here's the thing: when he came back with the apple, the White Queen followed him into Earth, and she had this whole commotion with like local police, and she grabbed like a a crossbar from a gas lamp, and she tore it off and like started fighting them, and it was a whole big to do. And she went back to Narnia with it in her hand, and she tossed it into, the woods. It's literally a piece of earth metal, and she tossed it into the woods. But it's Narnia. Everything grows in Narnia, so it grew.
It's like a wormhole to Earth.
It grew into a gas lamp, which is why the bottom of the gas lamp looks like a tree, but the top is a street lamp like what you'd see in, the turn of the century London.
Yes, I still don't buy it as urban fantasy.
I'm calling it urban fantasy, and I'm correct on this one.
Okay, you can still be wrong. Moving on to Michael's wrong again. That's the next episode, folks.
That'll be the next one. We could go 2-3 episodes on why I'm wrong. Go 4 or 5 why Jeff's wrong.
And who does it work for? I think it works for if you have really cool ideas for like fantastic elements, the use of paranormal, but it's like you don't, if you don't really see other worlds, don't use them. Use Earth. Do contemporary. There's a reason it's popular and it's overused, but
that doesn't, but it's still, they're good. Yeah, it doesn't make it bad. A lot of them are great reads.
And just try not to use all the same story rhythms. Realize if you get published, they'll make you. But or if you make it for television, you'll be made to. But I think it really works. I think you have a chance to attract people, because it's the mystery attached to it, the romance attached to it, the horror attached to it, the other things that you're bringing into the urban setting that people are familiar with that make it work. So I think if you're the person and you have a great idea for angels and demons, or another good one you can do stuff with. Any supernatural thing, any paranormal thing that you can fit in. Like you said, you're explaining why alleyways are dangerous. You're explaining why things people are familiar with being bad or bad through fantastic elements. And when you do that, you can attract to people who aren't attracted to elves and orcs and Gandalfs.
So world builder task. Are we closing it down?
We're closing it down.
Okay. So world builder task. My reading assignment is go read all the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe books. They're short. They are for children. They're quick, easy reads. I think there's 6 books, and they're awesome. Go read those. And also consider writing a short story in an urban fantasy setting. If you're working in an urban fantasy setting, well, then, hey, you're halfway done already.
Yeah.
What about real world task?
Real world task. Take a book and read it to your loved one at night.
That's a good one. I've been doing that for years.
Yeah. But it's a good way to interact with each other. And a good way to have, my wife and I have been doing it with nonfiction books too. So it doesn't have to be fiction. It can be nonfiction, things that are important to both of you.
Well, the tough thing about
and fiction should be one of those.
The tough thing about doing that with us is that my soothing dulcet tones puts my wife to sleep. Yeah, so I purposefully choose to read stuff that it's not a big deal if she misses a lot of detail, because she'll doze off and I'll read 2-3 chapters, but she'll only have caught the first 2 or 3 paragraphs.
So like when it's Faulkner, it's like just part of the door frame or something she makes.
Right. Yeah. I'm reading the Stand to my father.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beast of a one. Yeah.
It is. And I didn't know this. Like he was like, I was like, I was reading to him one day. I was like reading stuff off of my phone, and he was really enjoying it. And I was like, Dad, would you like me to like read a book to you? Like, would you like that? Would you like me reading to you? And he's like, yeah. So I was like, okay. And I was thinking, I was like, so what would you like? I'm expecting him to say like, I don't know, historical, or maybe a war book or something. Yeah. Right. And he's like, how about something on the apocalypse? And I was like, oh, okay. So I got him the apocalypse book. I went out and I bought The Stand, but I didn't know this, and if you're not familiar,
Michael is the walking dude. Yes.
Well, there's multiple versions of the book. Stephen King went back to it and did like a super duper unabridged version in like I think the early 80s. He went back to it, and the version that I am reading my father. I bought that thinking it was just the version. I didn't realize it as I was reading.
I didn't realize there were multiple versions.
As I was reading the beginning of the book, I discovered like the preface and everything where Stephen King is talking about going back to it and changing and altering and extending stuff or including things that were originally supposed to be part of the story that the publisher said, look, this book is way too long. And they cut it out. So he went back and, made the super.
Everything was a trilogy.
Right. And it's 75 chapters.
Good God.
It is a long read. Like
it must have been really tough to edit that book.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? It's like, what are you going to cut out?
My concern is that I would really like my father to complete the story. He may pass before we're finished reading it. It's a long read, and we don't read it every time I go see him. So,
you can finish it with him before or after.
Hopefully. Well, that's what I've already committed to is I'll finish it with after if I don't finish before. Yeah.
So very good. Hope you all enjoyed the episode, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.